All righty. I think we are pretty much good to go and start. So it's exactly 5 p.m. here in Eastern European summertime here in Finland. So I'd like to welcome everybody. It's about time to start the engine. So so warm welcome everybody. Awesome to see quite a few people. A bit of housekeeping first before we begin here today. So my name is Markus Söderblom. I know my last name is pretty hard to pronounce, especially for anyone outside the Nordic countries. I'm the co-founder of our, beautiful collective called the Blue Team Builders, aka BTB. I've been working in IT for way too long and in cybersec for over 13 years. So what is Blue Team Builders then? I'll come back to that in just a few seconds. So we'll start right now, and we got approximately 1 hour for the actual show and tell part. And after that, we got another half hour reserved if someone would like to continue the discussion, comment or whatever is up in your mind. So I'm all excited. This is, by the way, Blue Team Builders, our first English-speaking webinar. So far, all of our webinars have been in Finnish. The reason being because our main audience is from Finland. But I see we have a lot of new international friends here today, and that's awesome. I believe that's mainly because our friends in Exidium who sponsored this session today. So warm thank you guys over there. We'll sure appreciate that. And let's move on a bit with the agenda. So today's agenda should be visible right now. A few words about the Blue Team Builders, then a few words about the swag and the giveaways. Then we move on to the actual agenda. I'll be handing it over to our guest speaker today, Tim, and we'll go straight to the point, to the OpenEDR, which is our topic today. You can send questions via the chat if you want. We can discuss them and anytime you wish, anytime you want. And that's pretty much our agenda today. One more thing to notice, that please keep in mind that we'll be recording the session. So we'll be uploading this webinar to our Blue Team Builders YouTube channel. So hope that's all right for everybody. So what is Blue Team Builders anyway? Just a quick intro. So we basically are a Finnish cybersec community established 3 years ago. We're not a registered association. Here's the our web page. Blue Team Builders. Where does it come from anyway? So in the field of information security, it means defensive security. Blue Team means defensive security. Well, in a general or as a group, and the builder describes our activities to build something, mainly information security systems. Our aim is to promote awareness of various free or open source systems and applications. You guys know that the internet is full of awesome cyber free and open source application systems and so on. So we'd like to share the knowledge and contribute in that sense. So our activities are carried out by publishing various security-related blogs, articles, reports, videos, and as well as organizing these occasional live meetings and webinars, to which anyone interested are welcome to join, and where everyone can present their projects and share their thoughts. And the aim is to bring like-minded people, as myself and you guys, together and promote awareness and learning, and have a forum for discussion and exchange for information, and to provide opportunities for people working in or interested in cybersec. And also to present the projects, be inspired, ask questions, receive peer support for implementing, your own projects. all these activities are carried out on pro bono publico basis, which means that on voluntary basis, so without any commercial purposes. No ticket for meetings are being sold and no lecture fees are being paid, and at least for the time being. The sponsorship is always welcome, and it can be used to provide, for example, meeting facilities and refreshments and so on. So yeah, that's pretty much what the Blue Team Builder is all about. So it's pretty much like, in other words, you guys today are the real Blue Team Builders. Before we move on to the agenda, we got, of course, swag to share and to give. We usually like to thank people for contributing with a small token. So today, team can expect a way cool BTP cap, t-shirt, hoodie, or something similar. So you'll be able to represent, BTP internationally over there in the good old USA as well. That's very cool. And everybody else will be also getting a sticker, BTP sticker, but only if you've shared your mailing address in the registration form. It's definitely not mandatory, but if you want to do that. By the way, last time I checked, I noticed at least one mailing address without a name, which makes it a bit hard for our friends working in post offices to deliver anything. So please make sure your whole contact info is available so we can, share these cool BTP stickers. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I'm done for my part. I'll shut up, and so please take it away, Tim. Stage is yours, my man.
All right, that was perfect. Let me share my screen. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm going to share out my slides. So what I wanted to do today, guys, is really just go through a few things, right? Talk about endpoint detection, response, EDR, incident response, threat hunting, and then how that ties into the platform that we've open sourced over here at Exidium. Before I do that, just real quick, like, who am I? Not that you guys care too much, but look, I've been in the industry for close to 20 years. I'm our executive vice president of SOC services, managed services, cybersecurity services, whatever you want to say. I do run a global team of threat hunters and incident responders. In prior roles, I used to be the CISO at Digital Guardian, which was a data loss prevention company. And I was also the director of incident response at a company called DuPont. It's a chemical manufacturing company. Maybe you've heard of it. It's been around for over 200 years. But really my job over there was really where I fell in love with cybersecurity, protecting, 200 years worth of trade secrets at that particular organization. But then I decided to move on to the vendor space. All right, so let's get through this. Real quick, before I get into the slides about that, I do want to talk a little bit about what Exidium is. We are an endpoint protection platform company. We don't just open source, EDR, of course. We got to make some money somehow. But we do have a full platform of capabilities from, next-gen antivirus, which also includes host intrusion prevention, firewall capabilities. It also incorporates asset management, patch management, and even data loss prevention. And that's all at the pre-execution level. But where we differentiate in the market when we compare ourselves to other, players in this particular space, like CrowdStrike or SentinelOne, is we've got 27 patents around this technology that we call zero dwell containment, where any sort of unknown binary or suspicious code that executes maybe out of an entrenched document or a PDF, we containerize that. Right, we virtualize the hard drive, the registry, the COM interface. We allow it to execute on the device, but in a safe manner. So we prevent damage from occurring to the endpoint, which is actually pretty cool. No one else in the industry does this, and that's ultimately why I wanted to join this company, because of the innovation that Exidium ultimately provides. And then at the post-execution layer, this is really where I kind of step in terms of service. I provide a wide range of services and capabilities around XDR, MDR, EDR, etc. All right, that's my plug for the day. Let's talk about the free stuff now. All right, so moving on, open source EDR. What does that mean? It's free, right? Before we get to that, what do I believe EDR should contain? So I think any sort of EDR solution out in the market today should contain visibility into all the phases of the attack chain, right? From initial infiltration to backdoor installation, command and control, all the way through data exfiltration, right? And there should be signatures and techniques that we're looking for in each one of those particular phases. But really, the EDR solution that is available should provide that visibility across each and every one of those different phases. What does that mean? So from an endpoint visibility perspective, telemetry needs to be collected from that agent, right? And that includes things like process execution. So every time a process launches or runs, it should contain information about that process, all the metadata associated with it, the command line activity, the version information, the product information, right? Because you can build signatures based off of all of that telemetry data. It should include outbound network connections and registry activity. Are things being written to the auto run functionality for persistence purposes? Is there any sort of file movement activity? A lot of times when we see file movement activity, such as mass amounts of files being zipped up or compressed, it could be indicative of a potential ransomware operator, right? A lot of times what we see is we see them stage information in some suspicious directory, and then they exfiltrate it out that particular directory. File creation and deletion. A lot of times when we see bad guys come into an environment, whether that's state-sponsored espionage campaigns or even ransomware operators themselves, they drop or leave behind their tools, right? They start dropping the tool sets that they're going to leverage in order to achieve their objectives. And they might even delete those files too. But all of that information is relevant in terms of building a case, for incident response, right? Because when you're running an IR, you need to be able to answer all of those different types of questions, like root cause analysis, what happened, how did it happen? What was the entrance vector? What did the attacker do while they were on that device? What sort of files were left behind? Because these are all indicators. These are all IOCs and things that we can build into our, signature set that'll alert us kind of going forward. I remember one time when we were tracking a particular state-sponsored group back at my last company in DuPont. There was a particular technique that they always do. They always name their binaries 2-character letters, like ab.exe or tl.exe, and they would store them in a specific directory. There was like the Windows temp, and then they would name the folder like 1 or something, right? All of that is an indicator for me, right? And we knew the moment that particular group somehow breached us, right? There would always be a different entrance vector of how they'd slip their way in, whether that be, an end user clicking on a, attachment or something. But as soon as they got in, they would do that same technique. So it was almost like an immediate red flag to us. We're like, oh, they're back, right? So, but that information is completely relevant. And that's why, being able to record and track all that stuff is critical. Even script execution, right? If an attacker runs scripts or creates batch files or runs PowerShell commands, you want to be able to see inside those scripts, like what actually ran, what sort of commands did they execute? Because once again, signatures, right? Those are things that we want to look for. Inter-process communication. Are they attempting to inject into LSAS memory space for credential dumping, right? We also want to see user information or device information. So these are all relevant pieces of information that you want to see within your OpenEDR, type platform. MITRE ATT&CK framework. Let's talk about MITRE. MITRE's, been fantastic over the last 10 plus years, right? When they started forming this framework of all these different signature sets, right? What are the techniques and sub-techniques associated with an attacker, obtaining their objective, right? And they've broken it down perfectly, for us, right? Like what, account manipulation or command obfuscation, right? Each one of these techniques that has sub-techniques underneath it really can require a set of signatures that allow us to identify when you have a particular attacker in the environment, right? Because a lot of times it's not just malware that drops on an endpoint. Attackers are getting smarter. They're just living off the land. They're just using the tools that are built into the Windows operating system in order to achieve, once again, their objectives, right? They don't even need to necessarily install malware. Once they have legitimate credentials and access and they establish their persistence in that environment, maybe it's through, account creation or even dropping a web shell through an externally facing web server, they're in, right? And they can start doing whatever they want. So they're very careful these days in terms of what they do drop. That leads us to OpenEDR, right? So our founder, our owner, Uncle Melly, as I referred to the guy, he decided to open source our EDR technology. He believes that detection should be free, right? He's like a blue team builder. He wants to give back to the community. He thinks OpenEDR is the answer to that because he doesn't want to charge for that, and that makes sense. Like we should open source the detection components that we can allow maybe organizations that can't afford one of these hefty EPP platforms in order to detect threats, right? So we've open sourced that. If you go out to openedr.com, and I'm going to walk through this during the demo in spinning up an environment, but openedr.com is the website. You can literally spin up an environment in a matter of minutes, which I think is pretty cool. And we incorporate this for a wide range of individuals, right? It could be an MSP, an MSSP, it could be an enterprise, it could be someone in their basement, right? who's just learning cybersecurity and just wants to download the utilities to understand endpoint detection and response technology. So that would be you under the enterprise section. You would click on the get started for that. And what's nice is, as soon as that spins up, you get an agent, you deploy it, and it's up to you. You're off to the races from there. So we've open sourced the agent part of it. And if you go through this website, you can also get the full platform as well that's included in it. Now, if you're like a super nerd and you're like, I want to see the source code, Tim, I want to see like the bits and bytes behind it, you can also go to our GitHub page. It's also linked on that website. This will literally give you the source code associated with the OpenEDR agent itself. Now, you will have to set up your own Elasticsearch, like Kibana, your own SIM technology, basically to ingest this data if you wanted to go this route. Otherwise, we provide that full platform, which I personally recommend because it's a lot easier, right? You're off to the races day one. Moving on to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about threat hunting before we get into the demo itself. Like, what is threat hunting? What does that mean? How do you use EDR to do that? Right now, it's primarily human driven. Maybe in a month from now or 2 months from now, you're asking ChatGPT to find your malware in your environment. I'm sure AI is going to change the game from a threat hunting perspective. But, it's like hypothesis based. You're looking at the environment, kind of proactively seeking out unknown threats. Maybe that's lower fidelity alerts that are coming into the enterprise. You're stacking that data. You're looking for those outliers. You're looking for things that stand out, right? Things that, aren't traditional. Maybe you're even baselining your environment to understand what is normal behavior. And anytime there's something that steps outside that normal line, that's what you want to investigate. That's where you want to drill down. I've been doing threat hunting before the term was even kind of coined. And I'll tell you, I would spend days and days on end with nothing, like no results. Like, I'm not finding anything. And when you're protecting an environment with 90,000 endpoints, it can be difficult to find where the bad guy might be hiding. But there would always be a light at the end of the tunnel. We'd always find something like a thread to pull on that led us to, an implant, right? A command and control type capability. I remember in the very beginning days, when we were working at that organization, we didn't have, EDR. We didn't have any of these advanced detection technologies. So we had to get creative. We would spin up these large Linux servers and we would, send all of our proxy data, to this particular server and do grep commands and awk commands, kind of looking for command and control type activity. We'd stack them to see if there's anything that was occurring maybe once per day. And if you think about the amount of data that you're looking at, over 90,000 endpoints, that's intense, right?
Talking about alert fatigue. So
alert fatigue. Yeah, I don't want to hear about alert fatigue today. That's alert fatigue. But we would find stuff. Ironically, we would literally find these command and control type beaconing behaviors too, just by doing something as silly as that, right? But you had to be creative, and now it's actually a little bit easier these days. One thing you'll see too on our platform is we enable threat hunters and forensic responders. And this is all part of the package. This is a part of the open source component of this is you can, execute IOC hunting scans, right? If you got a list of IOCs or Yaris signatures, custom signatures that you want to scan your fleet of machines or devices, you can do that, which is pretty awesome. You can also do artifact acquisition. Let's say you need to pull back a particular file to see if it is in fact like a web shell. Is there a line of code in this particular file that's sitting on this IIS machine that is allowing persistence or backdoor, infiltration? You can pull back registry events. You can pull back event log. You can pull back whatever you want, right? Sky is the limit here, which I think is awesome. So we have this coding, script capability within our product, even on the EDR side, that allows us to execute these commands, which is pretty awesome. We also have this free tool. We're actually still in the middle of rebranding it to Exidium. We used to be called Komodo. I don't know if anyone remember the SSL days. This company's been around, since like 1998. We've been around for a while. We weren't just like sprouted out of nowhere. We used to be Komodo. and Melly, sold that part of the business and then invested into this endpoint protection platform. But one of the utilities that came out of it was this unknown threat hunter assessment tool. Well, I renamed it actually to that because I'm not a marketer, but I thought that was kind of like a cool name. Hey, you need that? You got that. There it is. It's a lightweight scanner, identifies unknown, potentially malicious files on the network. It's another free thing that we're giving away that you can download.
I remember the Komodo firewall. That was big. They were a big thing back in the days.
Komodo firewalls. Listen, yeah, they had a whole stack of technology, and we were even consumer facing as well. So,
yeah.
We're out there. I mean, and you think about even the SSL business and the impact that I think Melly had on that. I mean, he even put together a form that basically created the standards for all web browsers today, which is pretty awesome. So big impact to the industry. He's trying to do the same too now for the endpoint protection platform space. All right, moving on to threat signatures. I got a few more slides I just want to kind of go through. Now, there's a difference between threat hunting and just high fidelity threat signatures, and I'll delineate between I'll differentiate between those two. But here's an example, right? We leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Let's say the technique is command and scripting, and you look at PowerShell as the sub technique, right? The goal here is to create rules and signatures around all of that. And MITRE does a fantastic job of, like, what would you look for in that particular thing? And there's even frameworks. I think Red Canary has something out on their websites. It's on their GitHub page. It goes through the testing of all those, different techniques, and you can create signatures based off of that data, right? Like this is the set of, commands that we typically see adversaries execute, which is awesome. They pretty much do it all for you. So really your goal is to kind of create these pivotable signatures and alerts, right? It doesn't have to be just high fidelity. It also could be those low fidelity indicators as well. Like, let's say something launches at the root of a directory, like the C drive. Like, that's not malicious in nature, but it's weird. It's maybe something you want to investigate. But that's something you could stack. You could look at every binary that's executed at the root of a drive and say, okay, is this malicious? Is this bad? And then drill down in from there. So that's really kind of the goal of threat detection from a signature-based perspective. And here's a couple examples I can give. So this one I would consider high fidelity alerts, right? So if we're talking about PowerShell, let's say, the phase is execution. We're looking at the sub technique is PowerShell. This is what I would look for. If the process name is PowerShell.exe and the command line contains any of these types of items. Now, there's actually around 117 of these things that I would look for, but here's like a shortened list. Like if you see -NOP or -ENC for encoding, right? That's suspicious. That's something you want to look at, right? Like, how often are IT admins running encoded PowerShell commands? Now, I know it does happen. I know it, it can happen. I've seen IT admins do that, but you can baseline that type of behavior and then just look for anything outside of those. But these would be the things you want to investigate like immediately. And you can even see here, I have a screenshot of our technology. We capture the script content as well. So if something executes right inside like PowerShell, you can actually say, hey, you want to click to find out what's contained in here, just click here and it'll show you the full content of the command that was executed inside the script, which is, I think, pretty awesome. Same thing for like privilege escalation. This is another one of those high fidelity type alerts. If this particular registry key path gets changed and this is the value that it gets changed to is 0, this could be indicative of bypassing UAC mechanisms. And this would be one of these, once again, high fidelity alerts you'd want to pivot to immediately. And this is under the privilege escalation section. Same thing goes for defense evasion. If you got this bad guy sucking down Windows event logs and clearing it, he would run a command like wevt util and then, CL on the command line. This is such a simple rule, but this happens. A lot of times I've even seen malware having this, hard coded into its capabilities where it just wipes the Windows event logs because they're covering their tracks. They don't want to know, They don't want the incident responder knowing, right? Like, where did they come from?
I mean, there should be no reason for clearing the Windows event logs.
Yeah, why would you do that?
Anyway,
why would you do that?
Exactly.
So this is always one of those high fidelity indicators you want to jump on the second you see it because it's not legitimate. It's not going to happen really in the real world. Now, this is an example where I could say, okay, maybe this is something you start hunting through, right? This is a persistence thing. When an adversary gets into an environment, they might create an account locally on the device. That doesn't mean, all account creations locally on machines is bad. You would want to baseline that behavior. But when you see this in your environment, that could be something to look at. So So, if the process name is equal to net or PowerShell or dsadd.exe, and these are some of the commands that they run, take a look at it, see what account was created. I've literally seen bad guy, like I've seen individuals actually name them like hacker1, like I mean, which is insane. Like I don't even know why you would create a username called hacker1. Like you're literally just giving me the information that I need to immediately stop you.
So you're saying that there's no lead speak, there's no lead
no lead.
hacker?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. They need to be a little bit smarter than that. Try to blend in, call yourself like service, but no, they don't do that sometimes. So the smart ones do, but not always, right? They kind of have that obvious one. And the same thing goes for account discovery. I see this a lot of times too, where an adversary gets in, they'll run discovery commands. They'll look for, okay, what kind of users exist on this device. They'll maybe run a dir or a directory listing on the C users to see, what accounts exist, or query user. This is not a high fidelity alert, but it's a threat hunting signature. It's something you could pivot off of and drill into to take a look at, because it's suspicious. It's something that you might want to take a look at.
Would you consider that this kind of like low binaries? This is like using the utilities in the operating system itself. There's no signature left. You can't track. You can't find these with the traditional AV, for instance, like any of these.
Marcus, that's 100% right. That's the point of EDR, right? At the very beginning of all this, it's this living off the land thing, right? Because as adversaries get better, we need to be able to collect all these things that we traditionally wouldn't, because they're using all these techniques, over time. Now, granted, this type of technique is something they've always used, but now we have visibility to it. You need visibility to this type of behavior. And the same thing goes for any time threat intelligence stuff gets released, right? Let's say Alien Vault comes out with, indicators for Black Cat ransomware, and they're like, hey, look for these 10 things. You could create a signature that looks for those things. So if, like, for example, vssadmin.exe runs delete shadows, so that's when you're deleting the volume shadow copies on a device. This is indicative of a potential ransomware, because they don't want you to be able to restore, from backup. I mean, the second you see that occur in an environment, that is immediate response mode, because they're prepping up to actually deploy ransomware. We see this all the time, right? Like running delete shadows or any of these other, type indicators. You see there's that WEVT util as well when they're running the -C command, where they're clearing, the Windows event logs. So same thing. So EDR utilities can be used too for all these IOCs you get from Intel, type sites. And then just a couple of quick, like, advanced threat hunting use cases, things that I kind of like to use out in the field. You could use other free utilities that are out there. I love all the sysmon or Win sysinternal type utilities from Microsoft. Auto runs. You could run this auto runs command, which is at the command line. You could script it up and you could run it across your machines and then collect the output. And then on a server, look at all the different persistent mechanisms, that exist across, your machines. Is there anything that stands out? Is there anything that's executing out of a Windows temp directory, right? Those are the types of things you could even build dashboards for this type of data. Now, you don't have to necessarily use Splunk. I love Splunk, but it's incredibly expensive. It can be expensive, but you can create these cool dashboards. It could be in Elasticsearch too, or in Kibana. You can create these dashboards like this, where basically you ingest the data and then you're kind of analyzing it, looking at, okay, where does it have a launch string? Where are auto runs with toolbars? Are there any files that are not on disk, but there's something in the persistence, key? So you can look for all these interesting items to kind of hunt through, right? And that, for me, this is like what threat hunting is all about. It's taking forensic artifacts off the devices, and kind of drilling down and trying to find the unknown. Like, what is going on in my environment that I'm not aware of? Because your antivirus solution is not going to detect all this stuff. I mean, right to your point, Marcus, you need to be able to do these additional things. Or even looking at the master file table of devices. MFT is by far one of my favorite things to collect, because it's like it's a dictionary of your whole operating system, of everything that exists, on that machine, right? Or has existed. Maybe some files that got deleted. Sometimes there's entries still left behind the MFT for that. But basically, if you have that thread, that time frame of when you believe something happened, you could, drill down on that time frame, right? And you focus on, okay, show me what occurred around this time. You could see tools being dropped, right? This is how you go about kind of identifying what was left behind by the adversary or the attacker. Now, in this case, it's not always, they're not going to name their folders hacker tools, but by the way, this is a real case. This actually happened. They named their folder hacker tools. So you're making my job easy. And there's that single character binary garbage that we always see. Whenever I see Windows temp a.exe running, I'm like, bad guy, it's someone who's in the environment. And you could, once again, create, dashboards for this stuff, right? You want to hunt across MFT files, you can create these cool dashboards. I like to look for single character binaries, things executing out of a temp directory, suspicious looking name binaries like 421.exe or ncat.exe or nmap. Nmap, it's a legitimate tool, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times bad guys, they might use it to, to scan out an environment, right? Same thing goes for task schedule. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at task scheduling type activity, but what you could do is, once again, run this command and collect it across all your devices and look for any suspicious entries. Like in this particular case, they're running command.exe to copy all documents to this exfil folder. This is another real case. They literally called the folder exfil, right? So this is suspicious file movement, or maybe you see encoded PS commands in the task scheduler. Anytime the machine boots up, run this encoded, PowerShell command, or even double character binaries. Once again, just another thing to use, right? Another thing in our arsenal of threat hunting capabilities. And then finally, WMI persistence. This is another good one. I think this one kind of came out maybe like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, whatever. I think Mandiant did a post on this back in the day of, looking for WMI persistence, right? And what to look for. But here's the command. It's actually a script. You can execute this across your machines, get the output. For example, here's a target instance where notepad.exe is running this command. It's running certutil on a URL cache, or splitting it off of a Google Drive directory. So a lot of times what they do is they stage that. Pretty suspicious. I agree, Marcus. Like, that's not legitimate. Anytime I see stg2.exe being brought down by a Google Drive, I don't think so. Not in my environment. All right.
Excellent tools. Yeah.
Excellent tools. Let's finish this thing up. Incident response. I don't really need to talk about this. Yeah, everyone understands the whole incident response process, right? And what that means. But just finally, to wrap this up, like what are we getting at once we get to this? EDR tools are fantastic of recording all of this telemetry, but sometimes you need to get to that level of forensic analysis where you're also pulling back those artifacts of interest, like the MFT, the Windows event logs, the registry, right? Because EDR tools might not collect Windows event logs, and there's some nuggets of information in there that are incredibly useful to your investigation. So in this particular case, this is just an example. We onboarded a customer into our MDR services. And the second we onboarded them, basically over that period of time, once we started deploying the agents, we had identified a group of ransomware operators that were in their environment prior, right? So that there was already activity going on. Now, if you think about it, at this point, we don't have any EDR telemetry going back. But what we do have is forensic analysis capabilities, where we pulled back, leveraging our tool, these key things, and we could retell the story. And that's the beauty of the operating system. They always leave traces and tracks behind, right? You can always reconstruct the story of what happened on a particular endpoint or device that happened even 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Registry has things called like the shim cache, right? And the shim cache shows all historical process execution. So if you needed to do that, parse through that bad boy, and you can see that. So this is what we do, is we reconstruct in the IR game, right? So anyone who's in the incident response field, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about here. But this is the process of building out that root cause analysis. That's what customers want to know. Like, what was the root cause? How did they get in? What was the suspect 0? Did they take any data? That's always the other question. Did they take any data? Was anything exfiltrated? All right, show me the console. I've done enough talking. I'm done. Let's see the console itself.
Before we move on there.
Oh, so man. We'll slow it down, Marcus. Yep.
Just for the course of it. I mean, great info, a lot of good things. Before we get like sensory overloaded here, so how about like, are there any questions so far from anybody? I think I saw at least one in the chat. Somebody had a question over there. Let's see, what was it all about? Is this only for Windows platforms?
Oh, so, okay, the EDR, we are actively working on a Mac analytics agent. Right now, we just have Windows. We're going to be releasing Linux and Mac shortly as well. So we want to be able to cover all operating systems. Now, in our set of tool, we do cover all operating systems for our protection platform, but the EDR that we've open sourced is just Windows at the moment. It's a great question, though. Yep. Other questions?
I don't see any at this very moment, but maybe there will be later.
Okay. All right. So if that's not the case, let me pivot over to our openedr.com. So if you go to openedr.com, this is the site. I put a nice little video over there. It's like a how-to to spin up this thing. It's pretty easy. You can even click on this Get Started for free. If you scroll down here, it kind of discusses, everything about OpenEDR. If you wanted to click Get Started on one of these sections, if you're an MSP or an MSSP, you could do that as well. If you wanted to access the GitHub page, you could do that as well. You would just click on GitHub, and that's where you get all that source code information, right? We even have a video out there as well. So this is where it gets, once again, extremely technical. So if you want to go to this level, if you just want to, dive right in, I don't recommend going down this route, right? Because you got to set up, a couple of other things in order to get it going. So what you would do initially is you would click on the Get Started for free. And I didn't log out of my account, so that's why this is going. Hold on a sec. Let me just log out of this thing. Get started. And you're going to get this form, right? And what you would do is you would fill out this form. Say, my name is Tim. We'll open up a little account, timothy@gmail.com, right? We'll put in a little password. And then we'll put in my my phone number. I'm not putting my actual phone number. I don't want you guys calling me, pranking me. All right, we'll just create an account. So what this does is, in the background, it takes maybe 15 to 20 seconds, but it's going to spin up an environment. And what this environment is going to give you complete access to all of our capabilities, not just EDR, right? There's going to be capabilities for you to be able to also interact with the devices themselves, get information
so is it like
about the running.
Cloud tenant, would you say?
It's a cloud tenant. You're going to have your own individual tenant. You get, for free, 3 days of storage. You can go back 3 days. Anything beyond that, you got to start paying maybe a little bit, like a little tiny bit, right, for us to start using it. But you get 3 days for free, so you can kind of query all your data. You can, create signatures. You can alert all this stuff. But basically, once this thing does, it's going to say, okay, welcome to the OpenEDR project. You can now log in. You'll click login. You can also set up 2FA, so two-factor. I highly recommend doing that when you do that, when you set that up. Configuring, obviously, two-factor authentication is going to protect your account from access, because, look, think about this. If a bad guy gets access to your environment, I mean, he's got complete control of your devices. They can basically do anything. They can completely own it. So I always and highly recommend, obviously, setting up 2FA. For purpose of this demo, I'm not going to do that just because we're on a timeline. So while this thing spins up, maybe what I'm going to do is I'll show you what it'll drop you into, because I think that's important also to kind of keep this thing rolling.
In the meanwhile,
yep.
Is there a possibility though to get it up and running on premise?
So on premise, yes, but not our platform part of it. So you would have to set up your own SIM. And if you wanted it to be sent to your own SIM, you could do that. You could just use that GitHub landing page, right?
Okay, sure. But I mean, we're all Blue Team builders, so we're ready to go all the way.
Of course, you guys are. Listen, I understand that 100%. You want to go, you want to go down that route. So what you'll do is you'll have access to your console. Now, this console is going to be populated with data. Let me see if that thing is done spinning. Looks like it's still going through it. So it's provisioning. Typically, it takes like a minute or two. It doesn't take too long, but it does have to provision.
So basically, the console that you're about to demo is pretty much the same. It doesn't matter whether you have it on-prem or on the cloud tenant. It's the same, isn't it?
So the console that I'm going to demo right now is the cloud tenant. Okay, so you won't get this if you just download the source code and build your agent, because we're 100% cloud based, from this perspective. Right. But this is what you'll get, and so there's a ton of benefits to just doing it this route versus kind of going that other route, if that makes sense.
So sorry to continue a little bit, but just make clear. So would this mean, for example, that could you use, for example, Kibanas, from the Elastic Stack as your console for this, for example?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, you could do that exact thing. So what it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, do you want to enroll devices? It's going to give you a link, and what you'll do is you'll go out to that link, and it'll be able to download a package. So you'll go out to this package, you'll say download Windows installer. As I mentioned earlier, it just has Windows for now. And then you're off to the races, right? We can click finish, we're open, we're good to go. And you would go under the assets devices section. So assets devices. And once again, there's a YouTube video out on our Exidium YouTube site that walks through a lot of this stuff. Right now, nothing's populated in this particular tenant, but once you have this thing all set up, you would just install the agent, and then this is where the devices would start getting enrolled, right? So as soon as you install that agent, you're ready to go. What I'd like to do is just pivot to that console that already has all this stuff ready to go, because I want to show you some data, right? Like otherwise it's not really interesting and I have to like kind of do some things, right? So this is what it looks like. All this stuff is pivotable. You can drill down into it. Under the security section, endpoint security, you have an alerts triage interface, right? Where it'll show you all the different alerts that have triggered. It looks like this is our demo environment. So we have, a lot of the individuals that work at this company that are demoing our product. They're, obviously triggering some stuff. I'm just going to look at my particular machine. So if I filter by West Park, I can see everything that is triggered on this particular machine. And you can filter by, criticality level. If you wanted to, filter by MITRE technique or tactic, status level, any of those things, you can do that. When you click this little drill down thing, you can see metadata associated with that. So if in this particular case, it looks like bluesky.exe made a registry entry to, to an auto runs, right? So it looks like for persistence purposes, it registered this bluesky.exe executable under the registry, right? So this is something that you would want to investigate. I also have credential dumping program type activity, right? So if I drill down into this, I can see it looks like cache dump 64.exe executed. And here's all the metadata associated with that, right? I could also drill down into this further as well. If I wanted to see kind of like a process timeline view of what happened on this machine, I could drill down into this visually, right? And you can see how we highlight this. Here's all the process events around it, the network activity, registry activity. So I can instantly see that there's file and process related activity in this chart. And I can also see it in a tree view, which is pretty awesome, right? So I can see instantly that FG-dump executed it, manipulated 34 files, 8 of which were deleted. It wrote these files to disk. It looks like there was some suspicious writes to an executable file as well. So all these executable files were written to disk as well. Looks like PW dump, serve password dump, right? I could drill into this as well and see all the metadata associated with that as well, those 10 additional items. And we can manipulate this tree too. If you wanted to kind of walk back the tree, looking at other commands that ran, right? We also enrich the tree with the signatures that we've created. So you can see that there's credential dumping programs that are running. You can see create process events, but this is how an incident responder or a threat hunter, right, would kind of reconstruct that picture. And this is the beauty of EDR, right? Telling me everything. Was there any outbound network connections? Were there any registry activities? This now gives me all the indicators that I need in order to kind of hunt further across the environment. Because under this section, you can see there's hash searches, there's, IOC searches. There's a lot of different ways that we can kind of pivot into this data, if that makes sense. One thing I do want to point out, though, is under the alert policy section, if you go under alerts, this is where you can manage your EDR policies and rules, right? So we have something called an Exidium managed policy. If you're an MDR customer, you'll get this stuff out of the box. You'll also get that on OpenEDR as well. You'll get a set of rules, but these are the rules that you'll receive. So remember we talked about like clearing Windows event logs. So if I take a look at the indicator associated with that, here's what we're looking for, right? So if path matches wevt util.exe and the command line matches this, these stars are, basically anything before and after with the CL command, trigger an alert. And that's a high fidelity alert, right? So all of these.
So the score number 10 is the highest alert?
That's the highest score. I consider that really bad, right? That shouldn't happen. I consider those one of those alerts that you would immediately want to drill down into. All right. And you can see kind of, once again, the delineation between that, like China chopper activity, web shells launching, commands out of IIS. As I scroll further down here, you'll start to see things less, I would say risky, right? MS build executing temp files. This legitimately happens, but this is something that you could hunt through because it's something that bad guys will, sometimes do. Maybe hidden directory obfuscation or, binary executing out of a temp directory. These are lower fidelity alerts, but things that you would once again want to, drill down into. Same thing goes with like writing, memory dump excavator, type utilities running. But this is once again how you could also create additional, rule sets. Within your policy.
I like how the events are like displayed in a topic sense, in a very in a nutshell. They're very clear. You can doesn't need much of a description. You can just read it out and you pretty much figure out that what's going on. just by reading the topics. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty easy to use, right? Like the syntax of creating these rules, very simple, right? It's just it is equal to this, not equal to that, contains this. I hate when you have to write these super complex, long signatures sometimes, and it just makes it a little bit more difficult. I think the way that this was, thought out, right, makes sense. Now, if you wanted to drill down into this data, you would go under the event search. So this is kind of like the SIM section of our capability, right, where you're looking at all the data. And we'll populate a couple of aggregations here. You can add in additional aggregations as well, right? And this is really important, I think, from once again a hunting perspective, because you want to stack things. You want to see what's happening, less often versus more often within the environment. So if we wanted to drill down and look at specific machines, we could do that. If we wanted to look at certain components like containment activity or EDR telemetry, we could do that as well. Of course, there's a lot of demoers on our box today, so that's why it's spinning a little bit. I'm also looking over the last 30 days, which can also be a problem. So if I just retort it down to just one day, let me just kind of reset that stack here. I'll come back to that in a second because I want to show you what that looks like. But it looks like maybe someone's actually executing. But this is also the section of where you get the devices, right? So if you have device information like this West Park and you want to drill down into information about it, you could do that. You could also take action on this endpoint. So under the remote tool section, you could do a file explorer. Maybe you want to remotely connect to this box, right, as a system user or as the logged in user. So I can connect remotely to this machine and I can see all of the files that exist on this disk, right? So if there's a file that I want to pull back or if I want to investigate, I can automatically download that file, or I could even delete it. Maybe I want to clean up the device. Maybe there's things that are left behind. I could even open up a reverse shell into this, system and execute, commands as, as the system user.
Cool.
Right. So if I want to run whoami.exe on this device, who am I? I'm NT Authority, and baby, that's like top level, right? Do whatever you want.
Cool. You got the backdoor already there.
Backdoor. Yeah, I know it's kind of crazy, right? We're also a backdoor. So we're backdoor into this system. You can run commands, you can run PowerShell, scripts as well. You can look at, services, you can look at running processes. There's a lot that you can do just interactively, once again, with that device.
Can you do bash? Can you do bash with Linux?
Yeah, you can open up a bash. Yep, you can do all of that. So if I go back to this particular endpoint and I click into the endpoint, I can also see a lot of details associated with the machine. Serial information, manufacturer, external IPs. I could see running CPU usage and RAM usage. I can see a lot of metadata details, once again, that's being reported into the console. I can see software inventory, what's installed on this endpoint, right? What's the MSI installation type? Is there anything that's vulnerable or outdated from a patching perspective? Listen, all this stuff comes with our OpenEDR because it's built into our platform, but it's nice, right? So you can have a set of machines where you can leverage all of these capabilities, even just remote desktopping in here. If I just wanted to open up an RDP, site, right, or shell into this thing, I could do that as well. Once again, I can see all the networks that it's connecting to, the logs associated with it. Another cool thing that I love is this run procedure section. So out of the box, we provide thousands of these scripts, and you could do just about anything. If you wanted to clear the web browser history cache, you could do that. If you wanted to, list the list users, right? Like list the actual users that exist on disk, you could do that. So list local group users or list local groups. Like here's a lot of the custom scripts that are delivered here. Like list files from a specified folder, list map network drives. These are all kind of like playbooks, things that you could run, directly on the machine. So if I click that and I say, run that as, the system user, it would execute it. And then you could see those under the logs section. So there's going to be a log section and then in the script logs. I know there's a lot of things you kind of click through and get used to, but once you get used to the UI, I mean, it's very easy to get to this data. So here's a couple of things that I ran a little bit earlier, like list all users in the local group, right? If I click on details, I can see here are the 2 users that are located in the local group. So that output also gets sent to the console. So you don't have to go anywhere, right? Like everything is sent directly back to you, for analysis. Here's that other command already, ran and executed as well, right? Command completed completed successfully. So you can see all the details associated with that. If you want to see all startup applications, right, that's a good one. Here's everything that might be, potentially malicious, like persistence mechanisms. See this Windows blue sky.exe? That's a persistence mechanism that's contained inside the startup, right? And it's called system update. So once again, leveraging these scripts, right, can be extremely powerful. And you can create these yourselves, or you can leverage, once again, the things that we've built out of the box. I believe that's under the configuration template section if you go into procedures. So it's
Hey,
assets,
Tim,
configure. Yep.
quick questions. Would it make sense, or let me put it this way? So I'm sure you know Security Onion.
Security Onion.
Yeah.
Yep.
So can you make an OpenEDR agent to transmit data to Elastic Stack for Security Onion in such way that it would make sense for can it work out as an EDR agent for Security Onion if Security Onion is kind of like your CM in your home network or whatever? Can you do that?
Yeah. Are you talking about, so you want the EDR telemetry that we're collecting from our agent to go directly to that? You would just set up like NX log or whatever, just to send that data to NX to Security Onion. So it's possible today already. So that agent that you get on GitHub that you would download and install, you would just install NX log and then point it towards your Security Onion device, and that would be your SIM. So you could do that today. Yeah.
Okay. So if you know, like, I think nowadays at least OSSEC, if you know OSSEC, the hits.
I do. Yes.
Yeah. So can you like in any way compare the OpenEDR agent to OSSEC agent, and like, or I think the WASA is actually better than OSSEC as an open source host intrusion detection agent. So can you like in any way try to compare these two agents, the WASA or OSSEC agent to OpenEDR agent, and like can you like in any way see any benefits, or how do you is this I know this is a this is a hard question, man. Sorry about that already, but
no, it's not a bad question at all. I mean, so we have OSSEC built into our endpoint protection platform. I mean, comparatively, so it's like a host intrusion prevention capability, right? OSSEC is fantastic. So if you wanted to still go down that free route, right, where you're not having to pay for the solution. Now keep in mind, we offer our solution actually at a very affordable price. But if you wanted to stay in the free realm, you could leverage OSSEC running alongside our EDR, because our EDR is that telemetry collection engine, whereas OSSEC is a little bit different, right? It's got thousands of rules and hips and stuff that it's looking for and can block on. But I wouldn't consider it the same, right? It's kind of like two tools in your stack of capabilities. Like I don't think you can open up a reverse shell into OSSEC and interact with your device and do all that stuff, right? So it's a fantastic question, but I think it's in conjunction. Like I would use them together, if that makes sense. Are there any other questions too on the line? I want to make sure we answer any questions from individuals who have joined. Any questions about the platform or what we're looking at or anything at all? Because ultimately what it comes down to is kind of getting in there and playing with it, right? Using it for yourself and drilling down into the activity and the behavior, and then just getting used to the UI itself, right? If I'm, on the SIM side of the house, I know I was starting to show you this a little bit earlier. So this is how you go about, kind of analyzing the data. You can add in additional fields if you wanted to. A lot of times what I do is add in like path information or command line information. So I can click save and see, here's the commands that are being executed. I can, populate this up to 100, fields, because I like to see like everything in a row, right? I could also see, what are some of the rules that have triggered across that. So if I wanted to drill down into a specific rule, I could do that. Like maybe that suspicious who am I execution, which I ran. So if I drill down into that, I can see what endpoint executed that, that particular command over the last 30 days. And in this particular case, it was Westpark that did all of that. And here's the metadata associated with that. So it's pretty quick to kind of pivot around, drill down into this information and generate, right, the details that you want. but very easy. There's also different operator fields you can also, select from. So if you know like a destination IP address for an outbound network connection, right, you could take a look at that as well. If I get rid of this again, let me kind of bring back up the search. Let me click up the search.
Hey, in the meanwhile, let me ask you a million-dollar question. So have you tried to kill the agent in various ways? Have you succeeded? You're not going to tell me that you succeeded, though, but...
No. So, well, listen, Tim always succeeds at the end of the day. But in the very beginning, when I started here, I couldn't figure out how to shut this thing down. Like we have a lot of protection mechanisms as well that are built in, especially on the endpoint protection platform side. Like we leverage our HIPs for protecting all of our agents. Now, the EDR agent itself, like the running services, you can't it's, you can't really do much with it. You can't shut it down, stop it. It, throws up all these prompts. Now, could you leverage utilities like, like those kill programs, like legitimate kill programs you see in the field? We see ransomware operators, use that tactic all the time in the field against AV vendors and providers. That is one method that I'm sure would work, right? Is stopping those things. But once again, in order for us to protect that EDR, you kind of have to leverage that protection platform. And I don't know if OSSec has the ability to configure specific protections around other running processes. So if you're not using our full suite of capabilities, you could do that, right? If that makes sense. But yeah, look, there's always a way around things. I don't care what security tool you're using, you can kill it, right? There's just there's no ways about it. It's kind of like flying under the radar, trying to make it as tamper proof and as stealth as possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's, at a high level, that's kind of the platform. I know we're up at the hour. I would encourage the listeners, to definitely check it out, try it out, provide me feedback, hit me up on LinkedIn. We can have conversations as well to keep this thing going. But I'd love to hear your feedback. Like, what could be improved upon? What do you like about it? Melly loves hearing what people love about it too. So anytime you want to throw some positive comments, I know he likes that. But it is important, obviously, to get constructive feedback as well, because we want to improve, what we're providing to the masses.
Yeah, and I think it's an awesome idea, that the philosophy there, that giving back to the community in that sense, that you have the possibility to build it from the scratch on your own, if you want to do that, and in that sense also kind of like gain more competence and build your own professionalism and skills and all and whatnot. So that's an excellent opportunity. Yeah, that's why you guys are here today, and that's what it's about in this case. I mean, of course, there's always the commercial side, and it's great that you also told a lot about that as well. Yeah. So it's all good.
All good. We got to stay afloat somehow, Marcus. We got to charge some of those people. But for the community that I love, right? Like there is a free option here. You can tinker. Look, that's how I was brought up. And when, like I said, when we were working at that company, we didn't have a budget, right? We had to figure it out. Like we had to come up with scripts and other utilities and ways that we could monitor things. So yeah, I totally get it. Everyone's in a different spot, right, in terms of what they can afford.
And at least according to my kind of like research, there aren't that many open EDRs specific. I mean, there's been like I'd say honestly, I think there's been like for decades, like various type of AVs available, most like freeware, not open source, but freeware, for years and years. And at this time, I know for sure that there is another competitor from the open source point of view. Can't remember the name exactly, but in any way, there aren't much of EDR. So you guys are pretty much leading the road in that sense. So that's way cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, trying to lead the charge here. So yeah, and look, I had a great time today. I hope your listeners, got something out of this as well. We did record this entire session. If you need to, send it out, or I'll provide that to you, Marcus. But yeah, I really enjoyed spending the time today with you guys.
Hey, excellent. I'd like to thank you very much, Tim, for all of this. It's been excellent, very good presentation. If you don't mind, I can take back the slides for a few seconds here still. Yep. So let me just put the end presentation here just quickly. So just a second. Struggling a bit with the, here we go, and share. So yeah, so pretty much we are closing down here today. We have, however, a bit of a time here still. If somebody would like to continue the discussion, comment, share your thoughts, share your experiences on other products or any other freeware open source systems or whatever. So that's always cool. Yeah, and like Tim and I already told that this recording will be also uploaded into our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to check it out from there. And one more reminder about the very cool Blue Team Builder stickers. So if you've shared your mailing address, so we'll be able to send you out the BTB stickers. And regarding the future, we'll be having more of these freeware open source systems to be presented. Next fall, we're going to be talking about CM. We're going to be moving on to the dark side and talking about a little bit like a hack tools and so on. Yeah, so at least that's something to expect. But I think we got one more question or something. Let's see what's on in the chat room here just quickly. Not much, just thank you. So yeah, if nobody has any further questions or anything to contribute, so I'd like to thank you once again, guys. You guys are the Blue Team Builders, and once again, thank you, Tim, for the excellent presentation.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Your time
Thank
today.
you.